scourged, beaten,
Yeah.
the wounds on the thorns, the hands, the feet, and the scourging. Well, the institution, it was instituted by Christ, but that doesn't mean that it can't be flawed.
There are relics that inspire reverence, some that provoke awe, and then there are those that disturb the very foundations of what we think we know. The Shroud of Turin belongs to the last category. Long considered a sacred artifact by many, it has once again risen to global attention following a recent scientific breakthrough that has left researchers stunned. A new study, using advanced nuclear analysis, has verified what generations of believers held close. The shroud is not a medieval forgery, but rather a burial cloth dating back 2 millennia. Its fibers, its pollen, its weave, all whispering of ancient Jerusalem. But the implications go far beyond history or science. Why now? Why is this divine imprint being confirmed in our time? In this video, we'll uncover the full story behind this chilling discovery. Make sure to like, follow this channel, and let's begin. The Shroud of Turin is believed by millions to be the very linen that wrapped the crucified body of Jesus of Nazareth. Kept for centuries in a cathedral in northern Italy, it bears the faint but unmistakable image of a man who suffered the wounds described in the Gospels with startling accuracy. His face is solemn, peaceful, eyes closed as if in eternal rest. His wrists and feet display the puncture wounds from crucifixion nails. Across his back, shoulders, and legs, lash marks ripple like echoes of brutal Roman scourging. Bloodstains emerge from the forehead in a crown-like pattern, perfectly aligned with what would have been caused by a circlet of thorns. Every mark, every trace of blood, every bruise matches the biblical description of Christ's passion. Yet what truly unsettles the scientific community is not what the shroud depicts, but how. Despite decades of analysis, no one has been able to reproduce the image using known medieval materials or techniques. It is not painted, dyed, or printed. Under microscopic inspection, the image appears only on the outermost fibers of the cloth, with no penetration into the threads below, and no signs of brushwork or pigment. The color change that forms the image results from oxidation and dehydration of the cellulose in the linen, something that cannot be achieved through any conventional method of artistry. This has led some scientists to propose a theory that borders the line between the natural and the supernatural. The image was created by a burst of radiant energy, perhaps a release so intense, so sudden, that it scorched the image into the cloth like a divine photograph. The nature of this energy remains unexplainable. Some refer to it as a light of atomic magnitude so powerful that if replicated today, it would require radiation levels nearly impossible to harness without specialized reactors. This inexplicable phenomenon has given rise to the boldest hypothesis yet, that the image was imprinted at the exact moment of resurrection. Could it have been the split second when divinity re-entered the mortal vessel, transforming death into life and leaving behind a blazing echo of that transition? Not an act of man's hand, but a celestial event recorded not in text or memory, but in fabric. A moment in time, captured not by camera, but by divine force. But the shroud's journey through time is not only spiritual, it's tangled in smoke and fire, deception and revelation. For decades, a single test appeared to bury it beneath the weight of science. But now, hidden truths have emerged, and the narrative is shifting once more. In the late 1980s, a monumental attempt to close the book on the shroud's mystery was launched. 3 separate laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona were given permission to perform carbon-14 dating on the linen. The world held its breath. The results came swiftly and were devastating for the faithful. The shroud, they claimed, dated from the Middle Ages, somewhere between 1260 and 1390. Headlines blared. Skeptics rejoiced. The cloth, it seemed, was not the burial wrapping of Christ, but a well-crafted medieval forgery. But not all was as it appeared. Beneath the silence of Turin's cathedral, lies a cloth that refuses to be forgotten. Revered, doubted, even vilified by critics, the Shroud of Turin has endured centuries of scrutiny, and yet, like the story it may have once wrapped, it continues to rise. Its image, impossible to replicate, has drawn not only pilgrims, but scientists, historians, and theologians alike. For years, questions simmered below the surface. Critics pointed out irregularities in the test procedures. The samples had been taken from the very corner of the cloth, a section visibly darker and distinct from the rest. This area, many suspected, had been subject to repairs after a devastating fire that nearly destroyed the shroud in 1532. The edges were rewoven, reinforced by nuns who worked to restore the relic after molten silver burned through its container. What if the samples tested weren't from the original cloth at all? Decades passed, and slowly the cracks widened. In 2005, a peer-reviewed paper by Raymond N. Rogers, a chemist from Los Alamos National Laboratory and a former member of the original STIRP team, changed everything. Rogers analyzed fibers from the same region tested in the 80s and found they contained dyes and cotton not present in the rest of the cloth. The area was a patch. The test, therefore, was fatally flawed. Then came a shift. What do you believe the Shroud of Turin truly is, a sacred imprint of resurrection, or something science has yet to explain? Let me know your thoughts below. In 2022, a new study published in the journal Heritage reignited global interest. Using a technique called wide-angle X-ray scattering, WAXS, researchers analyzed a small sample of the shroud and compared its molecular structure with known linen samples from different historical periods. The result? A match not with medieval Europe, but with linen from the Middle East dated to the 1st century. The study didn't declare definitively that the shroud was Jesus' burial cloth, but it did what no prior study had done. It reopened the case with scientific precision, pointing not to forgery, but to authenticity. Beyond the fibers and burn marks, other evidence began to whisper louder. Embedded in the shroud are microscopic grains of pollen traces of life from lands long past. Botanists who analyzed the cloth discovered pollens native to Jerusalem and surrounding regions, plants that bloom only in the spring and grow only in the arid soils of ancient Judea. One particular pollen came from a thorn bush known to grow exclusively around Jerusalem, a plant linked by tradition to the crown of thorns pressed into Christ's brow. The weave itself also spoke volumes. The cloth is woven in a herringbone pattern rare for Europe in the Middle Ages, but known to be used in fine linen of the 1st century. In ancient Jewish burial customs, a body would be wrapped in a single cloth, often purchased hastily and expensively if the death occurred just before the Sabbath. In the Gospel of John, we are told that Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy man and secret disciple of Jesus, requested Pilate's permission to take Jesus' body and bury it. Alongside him came Nicodemus, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes weighing about 100 Roman pounds. The two men, once silent followers, stepped into the open, risking their lives to honor a crucified man. Together, they wrapped the body in linen according to Jewish custom, and laid him in a new tomb in a garden unused, silent, and near the place of execution. The Gospels are clear in their details. In Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the burial is described not as a rushed task, but as one performed with reverence. The linen, the spices, the tomb, all aligned with the practices of the time. And it is in this context that the shroud finds its place not as legend, but as artifact. The image it bears is not simply a silhouette. It is a crucified man, scourged, crowned with thorns, pierced in the side. His face is swollen, his body marked with trauma. But what the image also suggests is something more than death. It suggests the imprint of a passage between mortality and something greater. and that passage, by tradition, occurred at a place called Golgotha. Golgotha, translated as the place of the skull, is more than a location in Scripture. It is a place of paradox, where shame became glory, where death birthed life. Some early Christian traditions hold a haunting legend that beneath the hill where Christ was crucified, the skull of Adam, the first man, was buried. That on this very ground, where sin entered the world through Adam's fall, the Redeemer would offer his life to redeem it. The cross, then, was not just an instrument of death. It was a bridge between two men, the one who lost paradise and the one who would reopen its gates. This legend found its way into art. In early Christian mosaics, icons, and paintings, the crucifixion is often shown with a skull beneath the foot of the cross, representing Adam. It was a visual theology that Christ's blood, dripping from the cross, fell upon the bones of Adam, cleansing not only one man's sin, but all of humanity's. Whether historical or symbolic, the placement of the crucifixion outside the city walls, near a garden tomb, matches both the geography of Jerusalem and the scriptural timeline of Jesus' final hours. When Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus laid the body in the tomb, they sealed it with a stone and withdrew. The next mention of the linen cloths comes when Peter and John, alerted by Mary Magdalene, run to the tomb. In the Gospel of John, chapter 20, it is said that Peter entered and saw the linen lying there, and the cloth that had been around Jesus' head folded separately. It's a strange detail, one that seems insignificant until placed beside the evidence of the shroud. What if the cloth they saw was not merely discarded wrappings, but a relic already marked by divine fire? What if the image had already formed in that tomb an echo of resurrection, not yet understood? The burial customs, the geography, the pollen, the weave, the image, all of it forms a tapestry of converging evidence. The deeper one looks, the more the physical and spiritual merge. The shroud doesn't speak in thunder. It whispers through threads and blood and time. It calls attention not only to Christ's death, but to the way he was buried and what followed next. The body that lay inside it did not remain there long. As the early rays of dawn pierced the garden tomb, the linen lay empty, but not untouched. Something remained, a trace of glory, a moment of transformation seared into fabric. Whether the shroud is the burial cloth of Jesus or not, the question it leaves behind is no less staggering. How did an image like this form, and why does it defy every attempt to explain it? And why, after all this time, does it speak louder now? If you find this content important and thought-provoking, please click like to spread this message to more people. In the late 1970s, a team of scientists, photographers, chemists, and engineers gathered under one name, STURP, the Shroud of Turin Research Project. Their mission was straightforward, at least on paper: apply the most rigorous scientific methods of the time to determine the authenticity of the shroud. They came equipped with high-resolution cameras, infrared scanners, X-ray fluorescence, and spectroscopy instruments. But what they encountered was not what any of them expected. After years of testing, measuring, and cross-examining every fiber of the cloth, their final report made a statement no one saw coming. They could not explain how the image had formed. And more striking still, several members privately admitted that the image bore the unmistakable mark of something beyond human capability. One of them said bluntly, "This image was not made by human hands. Its origin is, quite simply, a mystery of physics, possibly a supernatural event." Not everyone on the STURP team came into the project with belief. In fact, many were agnostic or openly atheistic. But standing before the shroud under microscopes and sensors, something shifted. Forensic pathologists recognized anatomical details too precise to be medieval invention: minute capillary blood flow patterns, swelling consistent with beatings, accurate wound locations from flagellation. Photographers found that the image only fully revealed itself in a photographic negative, suggesting the linen captured a kind of light unknown to any natural source. And physicists realized that for the superficial coloration on the topmost fibers to occur without affecting the threads beneath, a sudden release of energy, massive, concentrated, and brief, had to be considered. For some of these scientists, the evidence became too much to ignore. Over time, testimonies emerged: quiet conversions, private confessions, belief where before there was only detachment. One chemist reportedly told a colleague, "I came to this as a skeptic. I'm leaving with questions I never thought I'd ask. Something happened here, something that doesn't belong to this world." Perhaps the most haunting realization was not that they failed to find answers, but that they had stumbled upon something meant to defy explanation. Had science, in its relentless pursuit of evidence, crossed into a realm it was never meant to quantify? Had it, without knowing, stepped into the very chamber where faith begins? The bridge between belief and proof became even more compelling when a different kind of witness stepped into the story, one not of lab coats and data, but of cameras and conviction. Mel Gibson, known for his bold storytelling and intense screen presence, had long been a fixture of Hollywood. From the battlefield cries of Braveheart to the broken stare of Lethal Weapon, he became a household name. But it was in 2004 that Gibson shook the world in an entirely new way. The Passion of the Christ, his visceral portrayal of Jesus' final hours, ripped through cultural barriers, delivering an unflinching look at divine suffering. Critics called it too violent, too raw. Audiences called it life-changing. Behind that film, however, was a deeper personal journey. Gibson, known for his struggles with fame, addiction, and controversy, had quietly turned toward faith during the production of The Passion. He learned Aramaic, consulted biblical scholars, and insisted on authenticity, down to the smallest gestures and accents. In a recent appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, Gibson opened up once again, this time about the Shroud of Turin. He spoke of it with the reverence of someone who had seen more than just research. He described how the image aligns with a first-century Hebrew male, complete with historically accurate hairstyles and features. But what truly caught attention was his recounting of a conversation with an Aramaic linguist who had helped translate the Passion. This expert pointed out that, under high magnification, the faint image of Roman coins bearing the face of Emperor Tiberius could be seen over the eyes of the man in the shroud. In Roman-era burial custom, coins were placed over the eyes to pay the ferrymen who carried souls to the afterlife. That detail, too obscure to fabricate, matched not only the culture of the time, but a specific emperor whose reign spanned the time of Jesus. Mel's calm delivery turned electric when he revealed he was already at work on a sequel to The Passion of the Christ, one that would explore not just the moments following the resurrection, but the ripple effects among the disciples, the birthing of the early church, the spreading of the gospel, and the spiritual warfare that followed. The film, The Passion of the Christ. Resurrection, he promises, will be unlike anything before it. It will move beyond suffering into power, beyond death into life, and at its center may lie the shroud, silent, mysterious, and enduring. It is perhaps no coincidence that, as this project is being developed, new research about the shroud is being revealed. Like a coordinated unfolding, truth and art are converging in a time when the world is more divided, more skeptical, and more desperate for meaning than ever before. For Gibson, the journey is not just cinematic, it's spiritual. He speaks less like a director and more like a messenger. One who knows that behind every story worth telling, there is a deeper truth worth uncovering. Have you read any Bible passages that remind you of this event? Please share them in the comments, and let's continue. Now consider the Ark of the Covenant. Revered as the most sacred object in all of ancient Israel, the Ark was said to hold the tablets of the 10 Commandments, the rod of Aaron, and a jar of manna from the desert. But more than that, The ark was the physical representation of God's presence among his people. It was carried into battle, rested behind the veil in the Holy of Holies, and only the high priest once a year could approach it. To touch the ark without authorization was to invite death. In the second book of Samuel, Uzzah, a man who reached out to steady the ark when it began to fall, was struck dead on the spot. It wasn't superstition. It was power pure, concentrated, and sacred. But the stories surrounding the ark did not end with the Old Testament. In more recent history, there have been claims that the ark still exists, hidden away, protected by generations of Ethiopian priests in a remote chapel in Axum. These guardians, according to numerous reports, often suffer from mysterious illnesses: cataracts, burns, radiation-like symptoms. Some can no longer stand for more than minutes in its presence. Others have reportedly died from exposure. Though unverified by mainstream institutions, the consistency of these testimonies is unnerving. If true, it suggests that the ark still pulses with the same uncontainable energy it once carried through the wilderness, a kind of divine radiation, untouched by time. This idea that sacred objects radiate a kind of otherworldly force is not isolated. It echoes in the phenomenon of the Shroud of Turin. The theory that the image was formed by a burst of energy at the moment of resurrection aligns with the concept of supernatural radiation. Both the ark and the shroud seem to contain something beyond elemental science, an imprint of the divine so powerful it interacts with matter itself. If the ark held the testimony of God's covenant with Israel, then the shroud may hold the testimony of the new covenant, sealed in blood and light. Throughout the centuries, there have been objects, moments, and phenomena that seem to defy the natural order, things that bear the unmistakable fingerprint of the divine, yet hover in that strange liminal space between miracle and mystery. The Shroud of Turin, in all its silent endurance and radiant enigma, is perhaps the most modern of these relics. But it is not the only one. Across time and continents, there have been other sacred items and events, equally baffling, equally persistent in their message, to remind humanity of something beyond itself. And in these connections woven through history, scripture, and faith, there emerges a possible pattern, a whisper of prophetic alignment that calls us to attention, perhaps even to prepare. Across the centuries, these bursts of divine presence have not been limited to relics alone. There have been events brief, public, and overwhelming that seem to pierce the veil between heaven and earth. In 1917, in the small Portuguese town of Fatima, 3 shepherd children reported visions of a woman clothed in light. The apparition, known today as Our Lady of Fatima, delivered messages of repentance, prayer, and warning. But it was the final vision, witnessed by tens of thousands, that shook the world, the so-called miracle of the sun. On that October day, under heavy clouds and mud-soaked fields, the sun was seen to spin, pulse, and dance in the sky. Skeptics present were left stunned. Journalists from secular newspapers described the phenomenon in detail. And while interpretations vary, what remains undeniable is this: something happened, something seen by too many to dismiss. A similar story unfolded centuries earlier in the hills of Tepeyac, near modern-day Mexico City. In 1531, a peasant named Juan Diego encountered a vision of a radiant woman, speaking in his native Nahuatl. She asked that a church be built on that site. As proof, she left her image imprinted on his tilma, a simple cloak of cactus fiber. That image, now known as Our Lady of Guadalupe, has survived for nearly 500 years without decay, despite the material's typical lifespan of less than 2 decades. Scientific studies have shown that the image contains no brush strokes, no known pigments, and even reflects light as if it were a living eye. Like the shroud, it appears to be a kind of divine photograph, one not made by human hands. And then, there are the Eucharistic miracles events in which consecrated hosts, typically during Mass, are reported to bleed, transform into flesh, or remain incorrupt over centuries. In Lanciano, Italy, a host that allegedly turned into heart muscle tissue has been preserved since the 8th century. Modern analysis revealed that the tissue is indeed cardiac muscle with intact DNA and contains both human blood type AB, the same found in the blood traces on the Shroud of Turin. Coincidence or confirmation? What binds these stories together is not simply the miraculous, it is the pattern, the consistency, the recurring fingerprint of something or someone intervening at precise moments in history. Each event, each relic, seems to carry a message not just to the people of its time, but to future generations. And now, in a world drowning in division, apathy, and noise, the Shroud of Turin has returned to the center of the conversation. Why now? The timing of this rediscovery of renewed scientific validation, of cinematic attention, of public curiosity, does not feel accidental. As moral foundations shift and spiritual hunger deepens, this image of a broken, resurrected man begins to speak again, not in condemnation, but in invitation, not in mystery for mystery's sake, but in warning and awakening. Is it possible that the shroud, like the ark, is not merely a historical artifact, but a prophetic sign, a divine echo breaking through the static of modern disbelief? It calls to mind Christ's own words in the Gospel of Matthew, "As lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man." And again, in Luke 21:11, "There will be great earthquakes, famines and pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven." The shroud may be one of those signs, a quiet one, a buried one, but unmistakable once seen. For centuries it waited burned, stitched, hidden, doubted, and now, just as voices begin to rise calling it real, just as the veil of skepticism begins to thin, it stands like a sentinel, a linen tomb wrapped in radiant silence, daring us to look closer. Not all signs are loud, some are soft. Some wait in the dark. Some, like the shroud, pulse with the quiet energy of eternity. And perhaps they are sounding now not to convince us, but to awaken us. Whether you believe or not, whether you seek answers through science or cling to the whispers of faith, the Shroud of Turin remains. It does not speak in thunder or flame. It does not demand belief with force. It simply exists silent, constant, and inexplicably resilient, waiting for those with eyes to see and hearts ready to listen. Through fire, war, and doubt, it has endured, not as proof, but as a sign. The words of Christ echo through the centuries in the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verse 19. "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." At the time, his words were misunderstood. And today, through the fragile threads of an ancient cloth, that same declaration seems to rise again. Could the shroud be a trace of that very moment? A sliver of divine defiance against the finality of the grave? We are not here merely to recount a mystery or showcase an artifact. We are here to sound the call to remember what has been given and what is still to come. The return of the King is not a legend. It is a promise. And every thread of that sacred cloth may be woven with warning and with grace. The world may be weary, hearts may be broken, but he is not finished. He is coming back. If this message stirred something in you, if you felt even a flicker of light in the darkness, don't let it pass. Like this video, share it with someone searching for meaning, and subscribe with the bell turned on so you never miss what's coming next. There are more truths to uncover, more signs to reveal, and more voices to amplify.